Hello and welcome to my video, where I'm going to show you how to knit bobbles using the traditional stockinette stitch method. It involves making an increase and then working only a few stitches back and forth before decreasing the stitch number back down to what you started with. This will create small to medium sized bobbles, but you can alter the method depending on how large you want the bobbles to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the demo is knit a swatch of stockinette stitch, which is knit stitches on the right side and purl stitches on the wrong side, and I'll add a border of garter stitch. The border is just to stop the stockinette stitch from curling at the edges. Then within the stockinette stitch, I'll space the bobbles 4 stitches apart on every other right side row. If you want to follow along with the same pattern, I'll leave it in the description box below. For my particular pattern, I needed to cast on a multiple of 5 stitches plus 4, so I cast on 19. I did a few rows of knit stitches for the garter stitch border to begin with, and then I just followed the pattern. Right, so I'm just going to start knitting across the row. And now I'll show you how to make a bobble. To begin making a bobble, you first need to do a kfbf increase, which stands for knit into the front, the back and the front again, and it's a double increase. To do this, you do all of the usual steps of a knit stitch, except you don't slip the stitch off the needle. Instead, you swing the right hand needle around to the back, take it down into the back of the same stitch, do all of the usual steps of a knit stitch, but again you don't slip the stitch off the needle. Instead, you knit into the front of the same stitch yet again, and do all of the usual steps of a knit stitch. But this time you do slip the stitch off the needle. You've now turned 1 stitch into 3 stitches. Now turn your work around and purl across these 3 stitches. Here you're essentially working backwards across the row. Then turn your work around again so the right side is facing you once more. You then need to do an S2 KPO decrease. This stands for slip 2, knit 1, pass slip stitches over, and it's a centered double decrease. What you need to do is slip 2 stitches knitwise together. So make sure the working yarn is at the back, then take the right hand needle up through the front of the next 2 stitches, and instead of working them, you just slip them off the end of the needle. Then knit a stitch, then use your left hand needle to take the 2 slip stitches over the knit stitch and drop them off the end of the needle. You've now decreased those 3 stitches back down to 1 stitch. And that's a bobble completed. Now I'm just going to knit 4 stitches and I'll show you that again. So first you need to do a kfbf increase by knitting into the front of the stitch, then the back of the same stitch, and then the front of the same stitch again. Now turn your work and purl 3 stitches. Turn your work again and do an S2 KPO decrease. So slip 2 stitches knitwise together, then knit a stitch, and use your left hand needle to pick up the 2 slip stitches. Take them over the stitch that you just knit and drop them off the end of the needle. And that's another bubble completed. And now I'm just carrying on with the rest of the pattern. If the bubbles aren't perfectly formed, just push them out like so. Note that if you want smaller bubbles, you would do a kfb increase, then turn and purl 2, then turn and do a kt-tog decrease. On the other hand, to make a larger, more dramatic bubble, increase by 3, 4 or 5 by knitting into the front and back of the stitch 4, 5 or 6 times, then turn and purl back across these stitches, then turn and immediately decrease back to 1 stitch. If you wanted to, you could add an extra row of stockinette stitch within this bubble by turning and knitting, turning and purling after you've first turned. So you basically turn the work another couple of times. And that's it, that's how you knit bobbles using the traditional method. I really hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.